Chapter 6. New Momentum.
After the baptisms of our first 42 faithful saints in the Amana'u cave and the blessing of the 16 children in Makefu, the work in Niue took on new momentum. We thought it was time to redecorate our meeting place, the Bluebell. A new look for the old Bluebell. As mentioned earlier, the Bluebell building consisted of a concrete slab approximately 30 by 30 feet, with roof and sides of rusting corrugated tin. There were no windows or doors, just openings. There was no furniture, only palm-woven mats. Our first effort was to paint the rusty roof. Our dear, eager young men did this in short order. The only paint they could find was a brown-red color. Finding paint for the rest of the building was a little harder. All we could find on the whole island, in any color, was 1 gallon of aluminum paint that we could buy from the government. At the time, most of the local buildings had thatched roofs and lime-plastered walls and required very little maintenance. There wasn't much need for paint stores on the island. We started painting with that 1 gallon of aluminum paint and kept pouring in kerosene as an additive until we finished the entire exterior. We're not sure how we painted the whole building with just 1 gallon, but we did. Maybe it was because the British gallon is bigger than the American gallon, but that much bigger? Probably not. We called that paint bucket our little miracle. We were certainly violating the laws of physics. After that backbending painting job, we walked a few feet away from the building to admire our labors. It looked just beautiful, regardless of its unorthodox history and the austerity of its non-religious design. The old Bluebell, now silver, looked beautiful to us. We were so pleased and grateful to have our own place of worship, no matter how humble. Our method of proselyting. From the beginning of our missionary labors on Niue Island, our approach in doing missionary work was always to begin by expressing our love and concern for the individual and the family. As we would meet them at their level and share the truth with them, many people would develop confidence in us. When they knew we really cared, they began to trust us and listen to our message. We would sit with them on the ground, on the mats, or in their huts. They would share their food with us, and we would share ours with them. We would laugh and cry with them. We would pray with them and share their victories or sorrows. Then we introduced them to new ideas, new skills, and new ways of doing things. We began with songs, both new and familiar, theirs and ours. We shared new games, such as volleyball and baseball, and new activities such as square dancing. We later introduced boxing, which was very popular in New Zealand. Then, in this setting, we shared the priceless gift of the knowledge of God and of His glorious work of the restoration among the children of men in these last days. Many people received our message with great joy and happiness, as it was attested to by the Spirit. Taking the gospel to new villages. Whenever we went to a new village to present the gospel, particularly if we knew no one who lived there, our procedure was as follows. We would always take some of our young Niuean members with us to help us get acquainted and to help interpret our message. We would usually enter a village in the early evening because most of the people would be at work in their plantations during the day. After locating ourselves in the center of the village, we would place a woven mat on the ground, lay our books and kerosene lantern on the mat, and sit down. We needed a lantern because most of our meetings would continue past sundown. Then one of us would stand up and begin singing a hymn, and we would all join in. Then we would have a prayer. By then, some people would start to gather, children first, and then some of the older villagers. All sat upon the ground to listen to our message. People were usually very courteous and listened attentively, but there were very few or no responses or questions. At the conclusion, we would usually greet the people individually, express our appreciation, and leave. A new home for the missionaries. Another small miracle happened at about this time. It is very rare that island traders or local merchants would leave the island. Their tenures were usually 20 to 25 years. However, for some reason, Mr. and Mrs. H.T. Duane, owners of a trading establishment, decided to leave. Their house at Utuko in Alofi became available. Considering the deficiencies of Anekale, our cave of the birds, which Elder Christensen bluntly labeled in his journal as, quote, a dump, end quote, we felt that almost anything would be an improvement. The house at Utuko would be a dream come true. We acted quickly and soon arrived at an agreement. Arrangements were made that we would occupy the house on October 11th, 1952, the day after the Duanes were scheduled to leave on the Tofua. There wasn't much furniture. After making negotiations with Captain Bell, we borrowed some small pieces of furniture from Anekale. Since the Duanes were taking their refrigerator with them, we still would not have one of those remarkable appliances. In fact, we wouldn't have one for 13 additional months, when mission headquarters would finally send us a small kerosene refrigerator from Auckland. Elder Christensen made this comment in his journal concerning our move from Anekale to Utuko, quote, "Today we moved into our new house. It is really going to be nice. It is just like moving from a tent into a mansion. We have Mariama and Wilson Mo'u to do our cooking. Our box of kai, food, came from New Zealand, so at last we have some decent kai to eat. We really feel happy, and it has lifted our morale about 100%. End quote. More problems with boils. During this time, my Job-like plague of boils continued giving me serious problems, temporarily slowing us down. Elder Christensen recorded, quote, "Elder Goodman has been very sick today. He has a cold in his chest, boils all over his left leg, and big blisters on his feet. He is really sick. I am now holding a 24-hour fast for him. The old devil is doing all in his power to stop us from doing this work." End quote. Elder Basil DeWitt arrives. The Tofua that arrived on October 10, 1952, brought another great blessing to Niue, in the person of Elder Basil E. DeWitt. Elder DeWitt was indeed one of God's special servants. When called to serve in the New Zealand mission, he was about 65 years old. At full stature, he stood about 5 feet tall. Full of life and love for everyone he met, he had an engaging personality that soon put all strangers at ease. He loved the church and did all he could to promote the work. Besides his wonderful grandfatherly spirit and attitude, he was an accomplished artist. He saw beauty in just about everything. He would spend most of his time telling stories and painting beautiful landscape scenes on coconut hulls, faces of watches, canvas, pillowcases, walls, or just about anything one might desire. He preached the gospel of love to everyone, no matter who or what they were. All the natives of Niue who knew Elder DeWitt loved him. Children sought him continually. Even the white Papalagi, or Europeans, liked him and sought his company. He was a bright star and a refreshing breeze to us all. Elder DeWitt was on Niue for only 94 days, just long enough to help strengthen our work and allow me to leave the island at one point for a 20-day respite with President Otley. But what a great 94 days those were. Speaking for both of us, Elder Christensen wrote, quote, "Elder DeWitt is sure a wonderful little man. I sure do love him, and I know that everyone does who knows him." End quote. Quote, "He has a very good method of proselyting by means of his wonderful paintings." End quote. And, quote, "People come around home to have a look at Elder DeWitt's paintings. His painting is a marvelous means of proselyting the gospel." End quote. "We had a little fun with Elder DeWitt today. continued Elder Christensen. "He was teasing us, so we filled up the bathtub and put him in it, clothes and all. He is really a good sport. He took it in good fashion. We certainly have a good time with him around. We had MIA this evening. Elder DeWitt held another art show. The next day, Elder DeWitt and I finished painting the bluebell inside as much as we are going to. Looks pretty good. I had Elder DeWitt cut my hair today, and I'll be darned if he didn't cut it all off. I was really surprised, but I guess he was just getting even with me." End quote. Resident Commissioner Larson, a good friend. Some of our great pleasures, and a little diversity from our usual work, were the occasions when we spent time with Resident Commissioner Larson and his family. They had a young son who lived with them. Their 2 daughters were at school in New Zealand. In his mid to late 40s, Mr. Larson was a big man physically, and was in great health and vigor. He loved life, and enjoyed almost everyone with whom he came in contact. He had a warm smile and a quick wit. He loved the people of Niue, and was dedicated to their progress. As the island's resident commissioner, he also served as the judge of the High Court of Niue. Some say he was a strict disciplinarian. There was a small golf course filled with coral rock that had been built on the island by the government. Mr. Larson invited us to enjoy many recreational hours together on that little golf course, such as it was. He came by our house often to see how we were doing, and he invited us almost every week to his house. He was certainly a good friend to us and to the church. Elder Christensen recorded the following about some of the times we spent with Mr. Larson. Quote, 10/4/52. Mr. Larson invited us over to his place for the evening. We played mahjong, a Chinese game. It was very interesting. Had a good conversation of the things pertaining to Niue Island. Had a nice social evening. Another entry. Went over to the Larsons and spent the evening. Got home at 12 a.m. Mr. Larson took us to see his new house and around the farm. And finally, Mr. Larson can surely do the hula. He is really fun to watch. End quote. President Otley and a general authority visit Niue. The November Island run of the SS Tofua was replaced by a sister ship, the SS Matua, a small freighter about the size of the Tofua. The Matua arrived on November 7, 1952, bringing us the usual excitement of contact with the outside world. That day, however, was a special day. President Otley arrived with 2 visitors from Salt Lake City who'd been touring the New Zealand mission, Bishop Carl W. Buhner, a member of the presiding bishopric, and Brother Edward O. Anderson, church architect. We were delighted and pleased to see these dear brethren. They brought encouragement and inspiration to our humble efforts. Elder Christensen elaborated on their visit. Quote, November 7th, 1952, the Matua arrived about 10 a.m. Elder DeWitt, Elder Goodman, and I were down on the wharf to greet President Otley, Bishop Buchner, and Brother Anderson. It was wonderful to see them. They had a good trip. I believe President Otley has put on a little weight since I saw him 3 months ago. The first thing we did was take them home to see our living quarters. They were very well pleased with it. Then we showed them the school, Mr. Larson's new home, the public works, a couple of building lots, and then went down to the Bluebell for a fia-fia. They gave us a big kai and some beautiful dancing. Bishop Buhner and Brother Anderson had never seen anything like it before. Each one of the brethren spoke to us all, and we certainly did enjoy it. They told the people if they're faithful and prayerful, we would soon have us some fine new chapels. After the fia-fia in Alofi, we got on a truck and went to Liku and La Kepa, where the people put on some more beautiful dances for us. We arrived back home about 7 p.m., dusty and dirty. We cleaned up and went to Mr. Larson's home for a couple of hours. We discussed the problems and necessities that we need here in Niue. After leaving Mr. Larson's home, we went on board the ship for 2 hours or so. President Otley talked to us and gave us counsel and advice. We all had a lovely day. I couldn't ever ask for a finer day than we had today. We said goodbye to them all. Elder Goodman is going away for 20 days or so. Elder DeWitt and I got on a lighter, small boat and came ashore. We got home about 2 a.m. We have really had a full day of it, but one that I will always remember." End quote. While President Otley, Bishop Buhner, and Brother Anderson were in Niue, we showed them a piece of land in Alofi that we'd been negotiating to lease as a place for a new chapel. They thought the site was good. The lease was finalized. The chapel in Alofi was built on that site, along with the new mission home. A short respite in Suva, Fiji. President Otley thought it best that I leave the island for a short period and find a solution to my persistent skin boils. I guess he also thought I needed a short break from the rigors of Niue. Brother Anderson and I stopped at Suva, Fiji, and spent a few days together there while President Otley and Bishop Buhner continued their journey on the Matua. Brother Anderson and I went fishing, something he loved to do, in a rented rowboat in Suva Harbor. We didn't catch much, but got plenty of rowing exercise. Brother Anderson was delightful to be with. Though somewhat reserved, according to our youthful standard, he was clever and witty. He was highly intelligent and knew well his craft as a master builder. At that time, Brother Anderson was just finishing his work on the architectural plans for the Los Angeles Temple, and he showed me some of the plans during our visit. Shirley and I later became one of the first couples married in that temple on August 17, 1956, shortly after its completion. A cure for the boils, and a radio. While in Suva, I was successful in finding a salve that, if applied early to my infections, would prevent the boils from festering. This was to be the final answer to my problem with boils, but it would be many months before they would all finally go away. I also purchased an overseas radio receiver for use on Niue. With the right antenna, we could now enjoy listening to what was happening in the outside world. Along with our little kerosene refrigerator, this radio would turn out to be one of the little pleasures and diversions from missionary life on Niue Island.